maybe some songs that sound like some songs that they would hear in their normal day-to-day environment, but then you put a classical song right next to it and then they can hear it with a breath of fresh air.
Cellist and vocalist Jordan Hamilton merges musical styles to tell stories of the human experience through a variety of musical genres. A member of the Last Gasp Collective and Southwest Michigan Symphony Orchestra, Jordan can be found performing primarily in the Midwest, where he has opened for national acts such as Eric Roberson and Nappy Roots. His most recent release, Vibrations, is a compilation of feelings expressed in sound with no words. Jordan will be playing at the Saginaw Art Museum as part of the Museum Tunes concert series on July 20th. More information is available at www.saginawArtMuseum.org. Jordan, I appreciate you being on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just for people who may not be familiar with your music or haven't listened to it before, you are a cellist, but have a little bit of a different take on things. So for those people, could you describe a little bit more about what your music is like?
Yeah. One of the shortest ways that I've been able to explain it, or maybe some of the goals subconsciously, is like I can have classical music fans come to my concert and get introduced to maybe hip hop, soul, or like folk music. And then I can have people that like hip hop, folk, and soul music, or one of those genres or whatever, come to my show and then they get put on by something else. And we all end up, going through the journey of music together in a way.
Yeah, I think when the layperson hears, oh, he's a cellist, there's a certain image that comes to mind of playing with a symphony or with a quartet or something of that sort. But what you're doing is a little different.
Right. Yeah, I incorporate a lot of like guitar pedals with the cello, and I play an electric cello. Some sets I play with an acoustic guitar and acoustic cello. But even then, the cello is playing a role of a chordal instrument, or like the role that a sideman, like saxophonist, would do, or lead guitar would do. And so in my set, I do use a lot of like beat machines, and I put the cello through distortion or reverb or some delays or chorus effects. And I try and get it to sound as varied as possible so that I can loop different layers to make it sound like a full song.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit more about what got you started sort of along this route with using your instrument in this unique way. Is that something that you sort of happened upon? Tell me a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, it's still evolving. It's still growing. I'm finding things I want to do differently with cello even now. But I feel like my whole experience with music and cello, I always say it's been more of like a breadcrumb experience versus an aha moment. I have had some aha moments, but even those are breadcrumbs. It was like that aha moment got me to the next one. And so when I was in undergrad, I kind of decided that although I was going to go along the classical path and, audition for orchestras, which I did, I was going to try and challenge myself to write music and really get in touch with music in general. Because in classical music, it's more so about execution of styles or ideas or of a plan, which is like the interpretation of music. But I wanted to figure out more. I wanted to have a better relationship with like making music. So when I was thinking about grad school, I kept this in mind and ended up finding a good pair at Western Michigan University. And here I was given a lot of room to kind of discover a lot of sounds that I may want to make on cello. And from there, one thing led to the next. One of the things that really got me into pedals for cello, I would try and play like blues jams or open mic jams, or I would started playing with this band called Last Gasp Collective. It's the band I play with now. And then I find that the acoustic cello is a nightmare to get onto the speakers. So, that just started a a black hole or like a wormhole towards figuring out how to amplify the cello. And maybe you need to get an electric cello. Maybe you just need to figure out a better preamp. Maybe you need to get different pedals that can help boost the signal, but also contain it so it doesn't feedback as much. So from there, figuring out all of those things, I discovered sounds that I may want on cello or sounds that I may want from music in general. And then one thing after the next, the sound that I'm working with today was uncovered.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to think about how that difference between interpreting what somebody else has already created and then creating something of your own. And in your case, in what you're doing, you're taking an instrument that has traditionally been used one way and you're making it your own. And so that sort of thread seems to be pulled through both your creation of music and the use of the instrument.
Right.
Do you find that you're also using different sources of inspiration as you're creating some of these new sounds?
Yeah, always.
Or are you turning sort of back to some of the more traditional uses of the instrument and then building off of that? Describe a little bit of that inspiration for me.
Yeah, it's always back and forth for me. I mean, one and the same. I think in classical music, there's a heavy tradition of looking in the past and gaining inspiration from that. But, with composers and stuff, they're always looking at maybe their peers or like sounds. They're getting inspiration from like their environment. They're gaining inspiration from the cars on the street, or they're gaining inspiration from that breakup that they just went through. And so it's a combination of that, or this new sound, this new instrument that was created. Like we now have 808s and stuff. I mean, they've been here forever. Auto-tune is a big thing, like you gain inspiration from current sounds, but then you also mix them with sounds that you've built a huge emotional foundation on from the past. And I think that's just a constant thing that people usually do. You're just mixing the past and the future to kind of work on the present. So, I always end up playing some classical music in my sets. Not always, but more than likely I'll end up having a classical music or two. Because I'm really inspired by the concept that classical music is not really dying. It's just there's more of a understanding that people don't want to go to a stuffy concert room anymore all the time just to experience classical music. And a lot of newcomers aren't going to come to those concerts because they don't want to be in that environment. And it's not because the music is bad. It's just because the setting is not right for them. And if they go into that setting and listen to it, it's not going to be cool to them. So one thing I like to do is just put some classical music next to maybe some songs that sound like some songs that they would hear in their normal day-to-day environment. But then you put a classical song right next to it, and then they can hear it with a breath of fresh air. And I'm really inspired by that concept in general of like, okay, how do we get me as a classical musician? It's a big thing in classical music for people to think about, how do you make this relevant for today's society? So that's one thing that I draw back from the past. But another thing I draw from the past is like, set lists today are more like symphonies back then. So you have your symphony or your albums. Your albums are like your symphony. So I usually think of set lists and albums as symphonies, a whole thing put together. You got movements, you got moments of anger, you have moments of bliss, you have moments of suspension. And I really try and think about my journey through music like that. But then from current times, I really am inspired by a lot of artists today and like their writing styles. I was just listening to a little bit of Saba and Smino. I love Robert Glasper. Bobby McFerrin is like one of my favorite musicians of all time. Like this concept of being able to get up on stage and just be him and go into some completely different world and invite other people in it. I love that. Leanne LaHavis and the internet and so many musicians and sounds I love today. So I draw from there, like storytelling and their styles, and then like big concept wise as well. But I try and mix and match both of them.
I think that's really interesting to think about the way that you're have that ability to switch back and forth. Here at the Art Museum, sometimes we talk about how at one point all art was modern art, and
Exactly.
We might think of something as old or classical, but in its own time, it may have been revolutionary or unthinkable.
Well, most of those things that we consider revolutionary or the pinnacle of like what music is today, people didn't like back then. Like even like when we're talking about Bach, like we sent Bach out into space to represent humanity's sound. And it's like they didn't even like his music back then. His son was more popular than him. And he was just in the church kind of making music for himself. And then happened to be like, maybe I forget the amount of years. It could have been 100 or a little bit less. I believe it's a little bit less. But Mendelssohn came upon his music and was like, this is kind of cool. And then started playing stuff. And now we kind of worship Bach with like making music, like having all the rules with music. But yes, like you said, it's like all music was modern music at some point. I mean, there's a lot of Beethoven stuff that people hated. Most of Mozart's music probably wasn't loved, but he was also rich. So, like he was also famous. So everyone was gonna, everyone was going to like it. He was like a pop musician. You know what I'm saying? Like Michael Jackson could put out some trash record and people would love it. It's like, it doesn't matter, but he was still a genius. So, but now it's like, now, and I don't think they would enjoy the way that we put their music on a pedestal nowadays. If those people were alive today, they would be beat makers and like they would be doing something else. So I feel like we have to sort of understand that and put their music within the same, give them the same respect that we give modern. Well, we don't really give modern music a lot of respect in sort of the classical realm. Yeah. But
do you find that you're sort of trying this, or you are in some ways straddling two worlds here between a more modern generation who is receiving this electronic kind of music with clear rhythms and beats, and then perhaps another demographic that is really taken off guard a little bit by what you're doing with your music. Tell me a little bit about how you're sort of navigating that pathway forward, and does it matter to you, or do you feel like you're going to just make your music and how people receive it, it's sort of up to them?
Yeah, that's mainly where I'm at. But it's not that I don't have those other things in mind or they haven't crossed my mind. And being in music school, it's very obvious if I bring in like a drum machine and start playing, people are going to be like, well, what are you trying to do to the cello? Yeah. So, those conversations come up a lot and I think about it, and I don't do it without taste, but also, I bring a cello to a beat tape sort of show or something like that. People are going to be like, well, who are you? And like, why are you here? And then, so I have to understand that realm of it too. It's like, yeah, cello represents more than just that sound. Even though it's a powerful instrument, as soon as you see a cello in somebody's hand, you automatically know that they've been in this circle that is sometimes posh and very demeaning and not really for you, Mm-hmm. So I do think about those spaces and, music that I release sometimes, but mostly I really do, like, the more I'm in it, the less I think about that. Because it really gets to be just too much. And I would like to, especially now when I'm not that popular, really make a lot of things that I just enjoy and then figure out where the music takes me, versus because I don't yet have to cater to a big audience and be like, stay in this sound. That may come in the future or may not, but that's something that I think I have the freedom to explore right now. So I really try and stay in that mindset of just trying to make whatever I enjoy right now and see where the road takes me. but that does put me in a rut because people can't often explain what I do.
Right. Well, I think it's admirable to sort of have that mindset, and the ability to, like you said, have a degree of freedom in what you make, and maybe not have the same expectations that somebody might have who has a large following or reputation, and you still have room to switch gears and do what you love.
Right. And that may be shooting myself in the foot and slowing down the journey, but I much rather have a large base to push from than, pigeonhole myself into a very tall, thin tower.
Yeah. You have expressed that a lot of your music is dealing with human experience. Do you find that you're working on compositions that are more personal in nature, or more directed towards a universal human experience?
I never write about. Maybe I do. I don't write about other people specifically. Maybe I do. A lot of things I write about from my own personal emotional experience, and maybe I didn't expect me directly. But maybe I saw it happen and it impacted me. And so I wrote something about it. I've been recently thinking a lot about, what are my songs about? Because I just listened to some of my music and I'm like, man, most of these songs, the lyrics aren't very obvious, but I find that a lot of them are either about love, death, past, or future. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are the things I usually end up talking about. And when you talk about death, you're talking about life inherently. You're talking about, what does it mean to live the days before you no longer can? And so I feel like everyone experiences those things, and that's kind of why I have that human experience. That's why I say that. So... yeah, but a lot of them are guided from personal insights.
Yeah, it sounds as though you start with a little bit of what's in front of you, or you're absorbing a lot of your world and translating that into music, eh? Right,
in my own way, but I don't know if it comes across that way. However it comes across. I don't know, but that's at least maybe where I usually. If I'm sitting down and I'm like, I want to write about something, that's what comes out. It may be me just being foolish, and it's like me just saying foolish lyrics just to talk about it. These last couple words that I've said, all the songs I've written recently that are out, those are more so not I'm actually talking about something, because I wanted to, at least if people were going to get introduced to me, I wanted them to know who I was first. But a lot of even songs I'm writing now, they're much more vague, but they still have some meaning. But it's not like I'm telling the meaning. It's like I'm painting a picture, and the meaning is decided by whatever you hear.
Yeah. Looking towards the future, do you have goals in mind of where you want your music to take you? We talked a little bit about the freedom that you have right now in your music and composition, and some of the limitations of that as well. Do you have some goals in mind for moving forward?
Yeah, the way I think about goals is not so much like an objective, like a reachable thing. It's more so like a verb. So I usually think about it like I want to at least be doing something in this realm versus I want to achieve that specific thing. So one of my music goals has always been to kind of just be traveling around and playing music for people in different cultures or different settings, but also being able to have an ear out for those things and listen to those experiences and enjoy those experiences. So if I'm able to do that consistently and, with that comes like, okay, well, how do you pay for all that travel? How do you give yourself those days to kind of be able to relax and explore? How do you, so that obviously comes with some hard goals, like, making money or having a certain amount of fan bases and stuff, or so that you can reach out to markets other than the ones that are very local to you. So, but that's one thing that I really would love to do. And I would like to be able to do that with friends. I like to be able to do that with other musicians that I love making music with and growing with. So probably about like 4 years ago, that's been my goal. And, as I'm doing this, I just want it to expand to whatever rate it needs to be in order for it to be sustainable. So that's kind of like it's not like a goal, like, oh yeah, because I've reached it to a degree, but I still want it to grow. Yeah. So that's how I think about goals. I don't really think about them as like, I need to be here by this date. Yeah. Obviously, everybody will have those, but that's within the realm of what I just said. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic vision. And we're certainly looking forward to having you here at the museum and introducing your music to some people here, and hopefully growing that circle of yours a little bit more. I think that it'll be a lot of fun.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Saginaw Art Museum podcast. You can stay connected with the museum through our website and social media channels. We invite you to become a subscriber of this podcast or become a monthly contributor to the show to help us carry out our mission of providing art for all.